And we have liftoff. We are now recording. So I guess you could introduce yourself in whatever way you see fit. Yeah. All right. Today we're going to be talking about two, well, technically three X-Men episodes from the 1990s animated series. One is called Till Death Do Us Part. And we're also going to be talking about one of the all-time classic episodes. Well, I mean, they're all kind of classic in a way. But the Unstoppable Juggernaut is the other one we're going to talk about. But I guess we'll talk about Till Death Do Us Part because that's a two-parter and it's like the sort of the bigger episode of the assortment here. So, what are your first thoughts on the episode after having rewatched it? Yeah, he is flamboyant for sure, right? And this is sort of out of left field, but have I ever told you the story of how the X-Men saved my grandmother's life? I may have told that before. But I'm gonna share this for the people out there because it's an interesting story. I I used to record this on VCR, VHS tape, and I had my grandma Nelma record it. So my mom would often show up to, pick up the tapes so I could watch them, and I had I had a small collection of X-Men tapes. And one time my mom showed up there, and my grandma was like passed out. She wasn't responding. So my grandma, you know, needed to go to the hospital. And if my mom hadn't showed up to get that X-Men tape, my grandmother probably would have died. So that's kind of a crazy fact that I can actually say that in a sort of weird way the X-Men saved my grandmother's life. How many people can say that? You know what I mean? So ironically, they are sort of like heroes to me because of that. I guess it's a yeah. In a way, it's really odd. Well, plus if you want, you can spin it another way and say that VCR technology saved my grandmother's life, right? Because if we didn't have that at the time, my mom would not have been there to pick up the tape. So yeah, yeah. So anyway, the Till Death Do Us Part is a two-part episode from season two. It's like the premiere two-parter, and it's a storyline that kicks off the second season of the series. And I think in some ways there's like a almost a point of no return in a in these two episodes, right? Like there are aspects of the lore that are very firmly established and that you wouldn't really be able to turn back away from very well, right? Well, for example, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, and Jean Grey had a wedding. Of course, Mr. Sinister was the one who arranged the wedding, and it's basically a sham because a character called um, Morph was actually taking the shape of the priest. So, what are your thoughts on that? I thought that was kind of funny, like how the wedding itself is a sham. Yeah, yeah. So the episode, it opens with Scott and Jean's wedding, and then of course you have Wolverine's jealousy and his theatrics in the danger room. I still don't really understand how that danger room exactly works. I mean, do you understand it? Yeah, it's something weird like that. And of course, you can escalate the danger in the danger room, which Morph actually does in this episode. Um, so Morph is really a disruptor. He's a bit like a male Mystique who was revived from death by working with Miss, or by he was reverved revived from death by Mr. Sinister, and he's technically working with him. So, what do you think of that relationship? Mr. Sinister, you mean? He said Mr. Strange. I guess he is strange. Oh, yeah. 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 He kind of I mean, in a way, he kind of reminds me of Pinhead from Hellraiser 3, because he's very powerful, yet you don't, there's certain limits apparently, yet you don't know exactly what those limits are. And in Hellraiser 3, he does this weird thing where he takes a pin out of his head and there's a worm wrapped around it. And that kind of reminded me of the worm thingy that he implants into Morph's head. It's a she seems a little bit otherworldly, I guess. You might Yeah. Yeah. So, well, we do get that he intends to use Jean and Scott for his genetic experiments, and I actually did a little research into this. Like looking at popular opinions on the episode, and some person was arguing like, well, why would he match Jean and Scott together rather than a more powerful male mutant? And I kind of wonder that myself. What is so special about Scott Summers and Jean Grey? It's possible that it's covered somewhere in the series and in the general X Men lore, but I was kind of left wondering that myself. Well, he must have. I mean, he does very much seem to specifically target them. I mean, there's sort of a subtext where he talks about monitoring them throughout their lives or something, which is really weird. Like, well, why did he wait until this moment to sort of gather them up? Like, I guess they had to be a certain age or something. I don't know what his thinking was there. Yeah, yeah. We could have he could have groomed them, to use a word that's popular among Republicans. He could have groomed them into it at a younger age. I mean, it's a really kinky thing if you think about it. Like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he was waiting for them to breed or to breed them, or if he was just going to extract their genetic material somehow. I don't know if they really. Yeah, little white croissants. Well, I do think. Well, from what I understand, like I was only somewhat involved in the X Men comics when I was a kid. We we weren't a bunch of rich people in our household, so I only sometimes got comic books. But from what I've gathered, Mister Sinister is related to Apocalypse. You know, after brushing up on the lore. Oh, I think he goes. Oh, Mister Sinister, maybe. Yeah, I know Apocalypse goes way back. He's like ancient. So, what do you think of Morph's return? Of course, he was created for the X-Men series, for this animated series. Do you like him as a character? Yeah, sure. And he was a former X-Man and presumed dead during the events of season one. And he returns with a deep resentment toward the X-Men and seemingly particularly Cyclops and Wolverine. So, to what extent do you think he is um, genuinely feeling betrayed by Wolverine and Cyclops? Or do you think, how much of it do you think is the manipulation by Mr. Sinister, including that brain implant thing that's. Yeah. I'm guessing that worm thing kind of taps into the anger, the feelings of abandonment as he was left behind during the Sentinel attack in season one. So there probably is, some genuine emotion in there, but it's probably not something that was exactly at the forefront. So he is being manipulated by Mister Sinister to some extent to work against the X Men, and that wormy mind control implant in the brain makes it debatable to what extent he truly has control over his actions. And I mean, thinking about that, it kind of reminds me of like times where a person loses control and they're like, well, I better gather myself here. There are moments in the episode where Morph goes through those situations. He kind of snaps back into they're my buddies and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. They almost seem like they're for hire to me. I don't know if they're truly ideologically aligned with anybody, and I don't know if they would need to have those implants in their skulls or whatever the hell that is. Yeah, yeah. I really don't know. I think I think their physical appearance might stay the same largely, but they might lose like a lot. I don't know if it's really fully explained. I know that in the Marvel comics they did try to explain how things worked. I mean, to the extent possible, and they often did a pretty good job, from what I recall. But I guess some things can't really be fully explained. Because we're dealing with fantasy stuff here to a larger degree. Sure. Well, like with Morph, it's funny we're on this topic now because this is where I was sort of where my notes were leading me because I was wondering about Morph's power, his ability to transform into other people. Because he transforms into Wolverine at some point, And it almost seems like he has his claws, right? Like, am I misremembering that? So are those claws also adamantium? Yeah, yeah. Maybe they'd be made out of like breadsticks or some shit. Who knows? You know, um, where's the dipping sauce? You know, I don't know, but well, I did look into this because Morph actually does appear in X-Men '97, which I haven't started watching yet. But the writer and producer for that, his name is Bo DiMeo. He actually explained how Morph was able to actually turn into the Hulk in that series. So, spoiler alert. But apparently, I mean, this according to what he says, Morph is altering their molecular density to mimic physical abilities, and by there, that's referring to Morph. It has nothing to do with them being mutants. This is why he was able to turn into the Hulk. So molecular density, I guess, is the explanation. You know, I don't know exactly what that means, but hey. And in this two-part series, I think part two of this series, there's a an appearance of a random mutant that turns into a garbage can, which is kind of funny. I don't know if that I don't know if that one ever appears again, or what kind of power that is, but that'd be kind of funny. You could prank somebody. You think they're throwing away like a dirty diaper into a garbage can, but it's like actually a person. Well, that would be more like a self prank, I guess, right? Oh yeah, like vacuum cleaners, things like that. Yeah. So that character was apparently a Morlock being chased by that anti mutant bigot gang. So that's another part of the episode we really haven't touched upon. The I know you don't like the word friends, but that's what they're called, the Friends of Humanity. Yeah. They also attack a mutant who only looks different and has no powers. So that's almost like a perfect symbol of a sort of vulnerable individual being targeted by bigots, right? Being bullied. And I guess that character actually does appear in the X-Men, only apparently he actually does have some powers, but I guess for the purposes of this episode they didn't give him any. So this is technically like a different X-Men universe, by the way, on that note. So for another topic, another subtopic, the X-Men saved Senator Kelly's life, and that was the only way that he changed his mind on the issue of the mutant question, as they would call it. What are your thoughts on that? Because that seems like it mirrors reality, where some people only change their mind once the issue starts impacting them. Yeah, yeah. That's kind of exactly where I was going with that mentally. Um, it's really sad that some people can't put themselves in another person's shoes without having being somebody in their family or whatever sometimes, or themselves directly, of course. Imagining it, like they just can't say, "Oh, what if I was in that situation? How would I respond to it?" They just can't do it sometimes. It's almost like a mental block, I guess. So yeah, yeah. And I think there's another part of this episode that has modern relevance too. That those anti-mutant bigots, they film Beast and the others defending themselves against the humans attacking them. But the leader of that, I forget his name. But anyway, he knows that the footage can be manipulated to make them look bad, so he's filming everything for that reason. Um, what what are your thoughts on that? You know, that sort of subtext. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is one of those things that you kind of like. If you are editing something, you do have to edit it. You know what I mean? You have to take chunks out, and I guess that will almost inevitably align with whatever agenda that we're having, unless there are true principles involved that prevent us from editing it and just saying, "Look, here's the whole chunk of footage," you know. And sure, sure, yeah, yeah. And Morph, um, during his little journey into the X Men mansion, he becomes rogue at one point and he begins why did I say that? Begins flirting with Gambit, suggesting that he actually can touch or yeah, he can actually touch her without being harmed by her powers. So that's a bit of manipulation too, you know. I guess this episode is really a lot about manipulating people. Um, and of course, Gambit, he can't say no to that muff, and he goes in for the kiss and gets knocked out by Rogue. Oh yeah, for people out there who are wondering about this, there's a scene in that episode where they really give a very obvious crotch shot on Rogue when she's lying down and sleeping, waiting, or and Gambit goes in to kiss her. Like it's pretty obvious that they're trying to do a beaver shot there, like without actually showing it. You know what I mean? Like so for a lot of kids who are just like they're just at the point of puberty, that was probably pretty exciting to see Rogue sitting there on or lying down on that couch. Their perverted little minds. I know I enjoyed that moment in the episode when I was younger. And yes, it does show it pretty prominently displays her mound for for lack of a better word. And then I know the other day when I mentioned this, you brought up Mounds bars as sort of an aside because of my use of language. Um, but anyway, that's one moment in this episode for sure. And I don't. I mean, we talked about this earlier, but I'm going to go back to it. So I don't fully understand Mister Sinister's powers. Why was he able to heal sometimes, but not from Cyclops's optic blast? What do you gather from that? Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. I s- yeah, I don't fully understand it, but I guess it's just one of those things, that we talked about earlier. Um, well, there's another part that kind of you know made me raise my eyebrows a little bit. There's a moment where Cyclops just sort of randomly finds the strength to break free from his restraints. So I was kind of wondering, well, how come he didn't do that earlier? Um, so I wouldn't say that the writing is 100% flawless in this episode. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, why does he suddenly have the strength to break free? Maybe it was. Maybe it was. He found that transitional moment from Bruce Banner into the Hulk, I guess. Um, yeah, at least double your strength, apparently. So, I also have to mention I do love the Nasty Boys, and that's what they're called. Who are Mister Sinister's henchmen. They're sort of like his pet mutant team. So, I I do think they mentioned the characters' names in the episode. There's Ruckus. He has that sonic scream. Then there's Gorgeous George. He's a nasty boy. Gorgeous George is a nasty boy. It sounds kinky to even say it, right? And he has a malleable body that Rogue compares to a tar pit when she's you know having a skirmish with him. So he reminds me a little bit of Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. Then there's yeah. Then there's Slab. He's just sort of a generic muscle bound tough guy thing. Actually, that's true. I guess that's one of his distinguishing characteristics. I do love that when he starts shouting something, uh, Gorgeous George lands on him mid sentence after Gorgeous George gets thrown by Rogue. I thought that was kind of funny because he was like right in the middle of talking, and it sounded like he was taunting Rogue because I thought he was calling her gorgeous, but then I realized that the male character's name is actually Gorgeous George. So it was a little bit odd. Maybe it was just me having the hots for Rogue, tapping back into my childhood or whatever. But I don't know. I think the confusion is a little bit more justified than that because it sounds like he was maybe taunting her at the time. So there's also a character called Hairbag who has some noxious breath. Well, I think it is one of his powers, but it's I think it's a power that we have all had at some point. You know, I'm sort of jealous of that ability, like for a skunk to be able to ward off enemies by stinking real bad. I think that's kind of cool. I think I think more often than not, I wish I had a superpower like that where I could just ward people off. And I guess one of the closest ways is just to just smell real bad. So, yeah, something along those lines. So, I mean, we've been talking about this for quite a while here. I might as well wrap up pretty soon. But anyway, Mister Sinister's plan is that he abducts Cyclops and Jean, taking them to his island base. He wants to exploit their DNA to create genetically superior mutants, and the X-Men rally together to rescue them, leading to that climactic showdown. So lastly, on this particular pair of episodes, what are your thoughts on the team's dynamics and particularly Wolverine's lingering feelings for Jean and his frustration with Cyclops? Yeah. Well, I guess one thing I do like about the animated series is that it actually does focus on Cyclops, whereas the movies for at least quite a while just made him like a side character. When in the actual comic books, he was more of a central character. It was like, uh, forgive the expression, but like Wolverine and friends for a long time, you know. So, speaking of Wolverine, I think in the first episode here, he sort of represents the antithesis of the saying that not all who wander are lost, because obviously Wolverine often has feelings of being lost, unfulfilled, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a real tension with that character almost everywhere he goes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, we might as well move on to the unstoppable Juggernaut. I think this one will probably have fewer things for us to talk about. So anyway, this is season one, episode 8. So what are your opening thoughts on this one? Yeah, I think he says a lot of clever things in this episode. Um, I kind of don't want to spoil them, so I'm not even gonna like get into the specific things he says here. Just watch the episode if you're listening to this, and you'll see them in a better context than I could probably deliver. But of course, this episode introduces the Juggernaut to the series, and he's one of the X Men's most iconic foes. And the episode focuses on themes of loyalty and teamwork, probably better than the other two episodes we discussed, right? Because they join together to find a way to defeat. And I guess Cyclops actually comes up with that plan in a way. So that would actually be an example of Cyclops demonstrating his leadership. Almost said chick like I was talking about a fucking razor, but leadership abilities. So while there's Juggernaut's attack at the beginning, he well, the episode starts with the X-Men returning to their mansion, and they find it destroyed, and initially they believe Magneto is responsible. So what are your thoughts on that? And Wolverine's little investigation where he's literally sniffing things out like a hound dog. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Well, the fact that they instantly assume it's Magneto kind of shows that they're well, not only is Magneto a bad guy in some respects, but you know, it shows that the X-Men are human, for lack of a better word. They can leap to assumptions at first, right? Yeah. And Stan Lee has said that Magneto was not necessarily a bad guy. He just wanted to well, this is an actual quote I'm reading right here. He just wanted to strike back at the people who were so bigoted and racist. He was trying to defend the mutants, and because society was not treating them fairly, he was going to teach society a lesson. He was a danger, of course, but I never thought of him as a villain. That's what Stan Lee said about Magneto. Yeah, he's doing what he thinks is right. Yeah, I mean that's right there in his name. How much more on the nose could you be? Could you be? Well, Apocalypse is also called Apocalypse, and I guess the Nasty Boys are kind of nasty now, in some respects. Well, this episode also introduces Colossus. You know, I'm sure most of you out there who are listening would already know this, but just for clarity's sake, Colossus is a Russian mutant with the ability to transform his body into very strong organic steel of some kind. And, you know, he's introduced here to probably a new audience who might not have been familiar with the character before, especially younger viewers. So, do you like Colossus? Yeah, yeah. It's also funny that Colossus is also accused of the destruction when they rule Magneto out, and the X-Men also discover that he's innocent. Um, and what's funny to me about this episode, though, is that they actually free him from jail. I mean, wouldn't he still face charges from that? And the rest of the X-Men team who were freeing him? No, no, yeah, yeah. I mean, it would yeah. So, I guess you just kind of have to suspend disbelief for that part, which I was more prepared to do as a child. I didn't even really think about it probably back then. But in truth, there'd probably be a bunch of charges we wouldn't even think about right here. Like destruction of property, emotional distress against the police. Who knows what? All kinds of different things could happen there in the courtroom. And this is, of course, this episode looks into Juggernaut's motivation. He's the true culprit here. It. Do they mention that his name is Kane Marco? I'm not sure that they do. No. Yeah. Yeah. They do mention that he's related to Charles Xavier, and I guess he's actually a stepbrother or something like that. Um, So, of course, Juggernaut is seeking revenge against Xavier, blaming him for some misfortunes in his life. Those aren't really specifically laid out, but here it's like they make him seem like a jealous sibling or something. Like Daddy gave the bald kid all the toys. I didn't get any of the toys. I just got the belt, that sort of thing. That's what it seems like. So of course, Juggernaut has immense strength, fueled by the mystical crimson gem of Sidorak, as you just mentioned, and it makes him nearly unstoppable. But they do find a way to stop him through teamwork. and that's a pretty cool thing. They work together to defeat Juggernaut and showcase their abilities and growing bond as a team. So yeah, I liked it. As I mentioned to you when we were planning this episode, I was like the part where Jubilee shoots her plasma thing, her plasma powers at him. He's like, "Oh, that tickles," you know. He's not phased by it one little bit. Yeah, it's like a massage or something. Do they have like do they have like beads that give massages? I think I've heard of something like that, like some sort of massage beads. I don't know. I'm getting a little sidetracked thinking about that, but um, there's also a moment where Colossus like slams into him and he actually moves. So the Juggernaut can be moved. That was kind of interesting. Yeah, I think if he like steps on a banana peel or some shit like that, he might go slipping. You know, that sort of thing. Oh, jeez, that's weird. So are you saying that he like ripped part of his skin off or something? Oh, weird. Yeah, the Blob has some interesting powers. I suppose like it would be fun to talk about him at one point too here, a little bit more in detail. But this episode, I mean, we might as well wrap it up pretty soon here. But it looks at his or the X Men's commitment to protecting innocent people, and they like kind of almost thwart a bank robbery in a way. Um, but they also kind of wrecked a police station, so they still broke the law themselves. you know. So I mean, I'm not sure how heroic they would be seen as by the overarching society. They are still lawbreakers. So I think this episode kind of gives a mixed message if you really think about it. Yeah, maybe they would drop the charges. I don't know. But I'd be pissed if I was one of those cops that got like, thrown around or whatever. But anyway, teamwork makes the dream work. I guess that's the theme of this episode. Wolverine slashes off his helmet, and Jean Grey works her mind powers against him. Oh yeah, Cyclops also blasted the helmet off. So I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts on this much simpler episode? Yeah, yeah. I guess it's a little bit like The Walking Dead. Like some episodes are like, they decide, oh, we better actually include zombies in this one. It's sort of like that. Well, we better have more action in this one than in the other one that that came before it or whatever. So it's definitely more of a, not that there wasn't action in the other episodes, of course, but this one's more fun in some ways because it's less weighty. You know. Yeah. Well, you know what? Anyway, I think I'll wrap this up and I'll let you go on your way. The sun is really shining in my face here. Um, and revealing all of the flaws that I've got, the ravages of age. So anyway, I guess I'll say hopefully the people out there enjoyed this episode. Um, I had fun talking about this and rewatching the X Men, and of course, Troutface. If you want to return at some point, feel free. I will reach out to you and annoy you about it at some point in the future. Oh, sure. Well, I'll throw some topics your way too, and we'll sort something out. So anyway, have a good day. I'm probably gonna go get something to eat. All right. Bye bye.